Ladies and gentlemen, I'll invite everybody back to the conference room because actually we are starting, well, the last part, the second part of our conference today, and actually I have a privilege and the challenge at the same time to moderate our second part, expert discussion panel on political constraints and opportunities provided by year 2019, the year of the elections not only in Ukraine but also well, around Ukraine. I have also privilege to present the distinguished speakers participating in today's session. First, I'm going to give a word to Iryna Bekeshkina, Director, Ilko Kucheriv Democratic Initiatives Foundation, well-known sociologist, and actually Iryna knows everything about Ukrainian feelings, Ukrainian public and political attitudes, and I hope that actually she will reveal a couple of secrets maybe for us. Then I'm going to give the word to Oleksandr Kliuzhev, Analyst representing civil network OPORA, which is a unique public organization, which is a unique civil society initiative, which is monitoring the process of elections in Ukraine in the fields. It's very important to take into account that actually, well, it's not about the political figures. Well, we are more or less understanding what our political figures are talking, and it's very important to know how the process of elections is organized, whether in democratic or non-democratic way. Then we'll go to give a word to Yuriy Yakymenko, Deputy Director of Razumkov Center, another well-known think tank in Ukraine, and Yuriy will tell us a few words about the major points, priorities, which are publicly at least actually presented by the major candidates, by the most important candidates, to the presidential race. And final international dimension of Ukrainian agenda, or better say actually what is Ukrainian agenda in international field. I'm talking about the elections which are going around Ukraine, but definitely, some of these elections are very important for Ukrainian understanding what's going on in the country, and of course, actually, how there would be external political impact upon the economic and, first of all, political situation in Ukraine. Roland Freudenstein, Policy Director, Wilfried Martens, Center for European Studies. I encourage all the speakers to keep the time. I hope that actually within 8 minutes it would be possible to present the major findings and the major messages. Then we'll have a very interesting question and answers section. And let's start from the very beginning. Iryna, tell us the truth. What Ukrainians think about Ukrainian politicians, about actually, let's put it in a different way. What Ukrainians expect from these presidential elections, first of all?
Well, I deal with elections more than 20 years, and I should to say that never the results of such elections were so unpredictable and unclear. Even last year, everyone was certain that at least Yulia Tymoshenko will participate in the second round of elections. It was clear. It was not clear about the second finalist. Approximately 3 or 4 candidates were stable with the equal results. 3 or 4. There were Gritsenko, Poroshenko, Boyko, and at the end of the year, Zelensky. So it was unpredictable, at least about that. But after the unexpected jerk of Zelensky, who has now became a leader with a significant margin, the situation has become even more unpredictable. According to the survey, you had infographics, and especially the survey just today was in media by Kyiv International Institute of Sociology. On the second place is Poroshenko, but the margin between Tymoshenko and Poroshenko and Tymoshenko is not too significant. So this is unpredictable. But secondly, yes, almost all sociological results clearly show that leadership, that the leadership of Zelensky. But there is one but. The main voters of Zelensky are young people, and as all previous elections testified, young people considerably less participate in the elections. Moreover, this is not even the matter of their desire, but the fact that a significant part of the youth in big cities does not live in their place of registration. And it is necessary for them to vote at the place of registration. Will they go to home to vote? This is an open question. And on this fact depends the result, at least of the first round of elections. So the situation with the participant of second round and the specialist of first round is not predictable, so that the results of the second round. Well, but not only the composition of the second round is unexpected, about winner, not predictable, but it is only unclear what will happen with the proposals of the candidates. It is rather clear for Poroshenko that I think that he will do what now. I formulated in such a way, the slowly crawl forward. Maybe it's my own decision. But what will be with other candidates? This is open question, because some of their proposals cannot be fulfilled, and some of their proposals are rather beyond the competence of the president. So it is not unclear too. What about people mood? People is not satisfied with the situation in the country. People are disappointed, and the case of Zelensky is rather was waiting, something like this. The current there is no policy that would have a positive trust rating. People disappointed, and according to our survey, you could see it, that 66 of people regarded that Ukraine needed new political leaders. But through only 25% saw such political leaders, and Zelensky was one of them. And the most maybe facts that explain the phenomenon of Zelensky, we asked what should to be the main differences between the new political leaders. First of all, not corrupt. Secondly, honestly. And thirdly, protecting the interests of ordinary people. And as for professionalism, only 18% of people attributed it to the main distinguished features of the new leaders. So, and second alarming fact, I think that about 20 people of citizens do not believe that the elections will be fair. That means that the losing candidate will be able to mobilize his or her electorate for protest action, that may lead to destabilization in the society. And mostly important, this is question the legitimacy of the newly elected president. So everything needs to be done for free and fair elections. That elections would be truly honest, and the results will not be in doubt. And here the main role belongs to civil society organizations. Why? Because they are trusted. in difference with the political parties and state authorities. I think my colleagues will tell about this in more details. I want to highlight the three main areas on which community organizations should concentrate. First of all, this is monitoring the course of the electoral campaign, fixing violations and observing the polling stations at the day of election. Second, close to me as a sociologist, this is conducting sociological surveys that are not dependent on parties and candidates. Because now this is a real campaign of discreditation of sociologists, because some candidates not like the rating of sociologists. And and very important to conduct independent exit poll, independent from political forces and from candidates. Usually, in all previous elections, the Democratic Initiative Foundation, I represent here, initiated and organized the national exit poll funded by Donors Forum and run by the most authoritative sociological firm. I think it's very important. Recently, we met with possible donors, and unfortunately, mostly donors from USA, from USA, and supported this. We wait for donors from European Union, because usually they participated in previous national exit polls too. And finally, it's very important to transform the nature of electoral campaign, because now, for me, it seems like some show, some spectators, and so on and so on. It's very important to transform into rational choice, And here I represent Association Electoral Council UA, that consisted from well-known experts, journalists, and civil society activists, and we formulated 5 blocks of questions that were sent to candidates. And we really hope to get answers from them, and maybe they will start today at the next session. And of course, it's very important the support and assistance of our European partners. And this is observation missions, timely responses to violations, principal position in difficult situations, that unfortunately will definitely be. And especially since Western observers trust our citizens and our foreign experts too. Thank you. If you will have questions, you are welcome.
Thank you very much, Iryna, for a very interesting presentation. Well, it's a bit provocative, but definitely, actually, the political process in Ukraine is really difficult, and right now it's really interesting in a way. And also, well, thank you very much for keeping more or less the time limit. Right now, I would like to give the floor to Oleksandr Kliuzhev, actually, well, to know from him how the electoral process has been developed in Ukraine, especially, well, in the fields. Oleksandr, the floor is yours, please.
Thank you for have been running Okay, thank you. We have been running observation mission of all Ukrainian elections in 2007. We will hold a parallel vote tabulation on every election day. We usually publish results of election before the Central Election Commission. You are welcome to check our website after election day. To begin with, I would like to emphasize that it's too early to say whether Ukrainian will pass exam of democratic and fair election, because we have serious risks, and unpredictable nature of election creates a conflict between candidates and motivates candidates spend big financial, media, and human resources during this election. OPORA and our observers welcome recent decision of Central Election Commission to hold election at a bigger number of polling stations in Donbass and Lugansk region. The increase is more than 178 polling stations, a stable rather calm situation in frontline cities, for instance, Mariinka, Kurakhov, Mariinka, Avdiivka, Popasna, Stanitsa Luganska played crucial role for the decision. In our view, it's very important that the state avoid any politically motivated decision related to frontline territories in Donetsk and Lugansk regions, and state made a decision to ensure a proper fulfillment of electoral rights for voters who haven't voted since 2014. Unfortunately, we have several cases of misusing of administrative resources. Different candidates who run for the presidency have opportunity to misuse administrative resources, but obviously most of such cases is relevant to candidates who hold a presidential post at the time of election. We strongly collaborate with law enforcement bodies and inform them about such type of electoral accidents. For this election, transparency of funding of candidates' campaign is a problem. In January and February, our observers appeals to the national police more than 100 times in cases of illegal production and distribution of materials by different candidates. Of course, it's only a small part of the problem in this area. We have severe concerns about signs of public confrontation between law enforcement bodies, agencies, and candidates. Recently, we have had a public disagreement between the Ministry of Internal Affairs, the General Prosecutor Office, the Security Service in terms of legal evaluation of voters' bribery. According to Ukrainian law, all payments to voters for agitation services are prohibited by the law. This provision of a law was adopted before the previous presidential election in the purpose of prevention the fake payment to voters. But now we have a legal confrontation. The Central Election Commission has adopted clarification of definition of voters' bribery, but of course, by law is not obvious answer to this problem, because in Ukraine, voters' bribery is traditionally a problem during election. And we ask different law enforcement bodies to strengthen a collaboration for effective investigation and prevention electoral crimes. Maybe it's...
Thank you very much, Oleksandr. I think that there will be an opportunity to ask about to ask some questions about the peculiarities of, so to speak, electoral process in the country. But well, as far as I understand from presentation of Iryna Bekeshkina, Ukrainians would like to have as a president, well, I call it, well, non-corrupted father of nation, right? Actually, supporting everybody, but non-corrupt at the same point. But from the other side, well, I would like to ask Yuriy Yakymenko to say actually what the candidates propose to Ukraine. Will we get non-corrupted father of nation, efficient, and actually somebody who will help Ukraine to solve all the political and economic problems? Yuriy, the floor is yours.
You see, thank you, Igor. It's very challenge, very big challenge for me, probably too much challenge. Better to address this question to the representatives of candidates that will be on the next panel. I can try to answer another question. Which policy is demanded from the candidate by their supporters? I think it is not less interested for our audience, and we especially did an opinion poll where we put 15 policy dilemmas to all population, and we have a position of median voter, and we also have a distribution of answers between supporters of different candidates for presidency. If we take one principal geopolitical issue, Ukrainian integration into the EU and NATO, and opposite position, non-bloc status of Ukraine and non-participation in military alliances. So we see here a clear picture when the majority of supporters of Petro Poroshenko, 85%, and majority of such candidates, supporters of such candidates as Zelensky, Tymoshenko, rather support those options than non-bloc status of non-participants in military alliances. Majority prevail also among supporters of Anatoly Gritsenko, and if you take Oleg Leshko, we have 50-50, 47 and 48% in favor of both options. And of course, opposite picture among supporters of Yuriy Boyko, where 78% support non-bloc status of Ukraine. Another issue, relations with Russia. Again, we have approximately the same distribution of supporters among voters of different candidates. Among supporters of Poroshenko, Gritsenko, Zelensky, Tymoshenko, and Leshko prevail majority support peace on the east of Ukraine on conditions only acceptable for the Ukrainian society. While among supporters of Yuriy Boyko, we see majority of people to support peace for all cost, at all costs. So this is a principal issue. Another one relates to the policy towards Russia, and among those candidates who we treat as pro-European, the big group, prevail positions that the position towards Russia should be strict. So good neighbor relations are possible only after restoration of full sovereignty and territorial integrity of Ukraine, and not earlier. Among voters of Yuriy Boyko prevail people who stands for reconciliation without any concessions. So on all possible conditions, so we need to restore relations with Russia. If we take the issues of domestic policy, also here we don't see such a clear-cut division between pro-European and pro-Russian candidates. For instance, majority of voters of all candidates without exclusion, they support the limitation of functions of central government and support of decentralization. The same relates to the balance of powers between the parliament and the president. Only in the case of Petro Poroshenko, we have the same part of voters that support both alternatives on the same level. More influence to the parliament or more influence to the president. Among other candidate supporters prevail the part of those who support shift towards parliamentarism. Of course, there is a serious difference between pro-European voters of pro-European candidates and Yuriy Boyko, who is the only pro-Russian candidate in this list in the sphere of use of Ukrainian language. Majority of voters of supporters of Poroshenko, Gritsenko, Leshko, Tymoshenko, and Zelensky support positions the state should promote and popularize Ukrainian language among Ukrainian citizens in all spheres in public life, while among voters of Boyko prevail people who hold the positions that the state should ensure that all languages have equal treatment in Ukraine. In questions related to economic policy, we see a bit different position. When There is no strict division between people who support market economy more or who more intended to support state intervention into economy. The only exclusion is the vouchers of the current President Petro Poroshenko, where basically 62% support more market economy and 29% regulative function of state, regulative intervention of the state into economy. Also, those supporters of market economy did prevail from the vouchers of Zelensky, while among other supporters of candidates, such as Oleg Leshko, Anatoly Gritsenko, and Yulia Tymoshenko, a slightly bigger part of people support state intervention into economy. And in the case of Yuriy Boyko, we have a majority, almost 70%, that supported the state intervention into economy. Again, we have the same situation with the policy in the sphere of liberal and open economy or support for national domestic business and producers. Practically, those parts are the same in all candidates that we ask, all supporters of all candidates. And the proportion is probably 50-50 at all, from 46 to 45, 41 to 50, and so on. But here there is no strict demand for certain kind of economic policy. The same is the same situation is with privatization, and here we look when supporters of some candidates who are pro-European by their geopolitical orientation, their supporters still support more position where we don't need to go towards massive privatization. On the contrary, we should develop the public sector of economy and then reprivatize the previously privatized enterprises. So if you look general on this picture, the same is with the question of moratorium on extension of moratorium on agricultural land, where supporters of all candidates are against free trade of agricultural land. So we have a rather complicated situation when in views of our population and supporters of different candidates in social and economic issues, we see rather shift towards left policy orientations and less attention to liberal approaches in economy. And this is directly linked with the issue of continuation of reforms in Ukraine that we had from our European partners and that they expect from the president that the course of reform should be continued. Now, according to the polls, we have a very negative attitude of population, rather negative attitude of population to the current results of reforms. Because a lot of people don't feel better from them, but a lot of them feel inconveniences of that. So what we see here that the candidates for presidency and the future president will be limited in their approaches toward policy, especially in social and economic sphere, with those limitations and with those expectations of people of more stronger social-oriented policy, more leftist policy. And the reflection of that is precisely in the electoral programs of the candidates for presidency that just can't avoid just such issues as rising pensions, reduction of tariffs, more subsidies to the people with low incomes, and a lot of things that some people call that they are populist. It is not a populist in a strict sense of this word. It's just a demand of society. And probably the biggest challenge for policy of the current president, or the future president of Ukraine, will be especially this issue, this challenge by policy in social and economic sphere. And a lot of, not only the outcome of these elections have a meaning, but also the political course that will be pursued by the future elected president and his or her relations with firstly with the current parliament and then with the new parliament after parliamentary elections. In any case, we expect for an interesting and tense year. Thank you.
I just would like to add that actually the political history and the political life in Ukraine has been never dull. So that's every year is interesting. Next year will be even interesting. Year 2020 will be interesting. So please, will stay tuned actually to Ukrainian page where there will be a lot of interesting things. But in any case, I would like to say that actually we are not a unique country in the globe, and definitely actually well in year 2019 there would be a series of elections of different level in the western part of the world. So in this case I would like actually to give the floor to Roland Freudenstein, who is the policy director of Wilfried Martens Center for European Studies, and actually well I just would like maybe well to provoke a discussion or well to ask you two questions. What is the Ukrainian agenda in the western elections in general, and what would be well the potential political implication for Ukraine of these elections at different level, at the national level and at the level of the European Union? Martin, the floor is yours.
Thank you. Thanks a lot, Igor. Yeah, I realize that I'm the odd minority in this panel, because I'm not speaking primarily about the Ukrainian elections, but about the elections to the European Parliament this year. So, if you want, there's good news and bad news. Well, let's exceptionally start with the good news, and that is that, of course, Ukraine is not going to be the main topic of these elections. So that also means that the populists will mainly use other topics to mobilize their electorate, not the question of Eastern enlargement or the relations with the Eastern neighborhood of the European Union. I count that as good news. The bad news is that indeed, however, if you look at which role the question of relations to Ukraine or the question of the situation in Ukraine itself have played in recent years in elections and votes, and generally in the ability of populists to score some points with public opinion, well, if you look at that question, then the news is not so good. The most prominent example, as you all know, is the Dutch referendum on the DCFTA, the free trade agreement with Ukraine, where you had a couple of interesting phenomena. First of all, there was a very active populist campaign against the Dutch vote about this agreement, and there was no corresponding yes campaign, if you want. The moderate political parties did not really get themselves to support the agreement and actively campaign for it in the Dutch population. Second, there was evident Russian meddling. You can always, after the fact, you can establish exactly which type of news about Ukraine emerged first, where did it emerge, what kind of news there were, and so on. And obviously, so there was Russian meddling by, our well-known friends from the Troll Factory in St. Petersburg, Sputnik TV, Sputnik News, RT, and other outlets. But, of course, you can never say exactly, just like with the US election, if you want, in 2016, you cannot pin it down to say Russian influence killed the referendum or Russian influence produced the negative outcome of the referendum. That cannot be established clearly. But it did play a role. And the third point in this aspect, in this question of the Dutch referendum, is already the point that I'm mainly going to try rub in here in my contribution to the panel. That is that events in Ukraine, the situation in Ukraine, made it relatively easy for populists to claim that closer relations with Ukraine is to the detriment of the citizens of the European Union. That sounds terribly harsh. I don't believe that, but this is the claim that the populists are dishing out to our electorates, and this is the claim that Ukrainians have to counter more actively by doing what they have started to do, of course, in Ukraine, which is reforming the country. You know, it's strengthening an independent judiciary. It is fighting corruption more actively. It is reform of the energy sector. It is, you know, not letting attacks on civil society activists happen. It is investigating economic crimes more actively. All these points that have come up in recent months and years by Ukraine's EU partners in negotiating improvements in our relationship, all these points have to be addressed more clearly, and that will make it more difficult for the populists or for Russian trolls to actually campaign against Ukraine. Now, as to the upcoming European election, as I said, Ukraine is not going to be the main topic. It's not going to be even one of the most important topics. But yes, populists will use the question of our relations with the Eastern neighborhood will make this one of the points where they claim that there is a kind of conspiracy between a Brussels elite, which for whatever reason, because they want to line their pockets or because they want to, they're highly idealistic humanitarian people, but for whatever reason they want to enhance relations with Ukraine. But what the citizen gets is more corruption, is more competition on the informal labor market, and so on and so on. More crime. I'm paraphrasing here, but you know this is the narrative dished out by populists in the European Union, and it will happen again during the European election campaign. And again, and I'm finishing on this point, the task is twofold. The task for moderate political parties and elites in the European Union is, of course, to win the hearts and minds of our own people, that closer relations with Ukraine are to our own benefit. And the other task is with Ukraine itself to actually counter the narratives that Ukraine only exports corruption and crime to the European Union or illegal workers, and that in fact Ukraine can positively contribute to the well-being of the citizens of the European Union. And one last point. Ukraine has been the victim of military aggression by Russia. We all know this. I don't have to convince you. But that cannot be the main point of the rhetoric of Ukrainians when they are talking to public opinion in the European Union. I'm really sorry, but that will not cut the ice. It is an important point among many, but the more important point is, what is Ukraine doing to reform its own country? What is Ukraine doing to positively contribute to a safer and more prosperous Europe? Thank you.
Thank you very much. I think that actually you raised a couple of very interesting points and issues, and definitely they will be referred to either during the comment session or maybe just during our discussion. I would like to thank everybody for good presentations, excellent presentations. We are moving strictly in accordance with our schedule, so we have half an hour for comments, questions, and answers. So I would propose, who is going to make a comment or maybe to ask a question to our panelists. So let's move on from this side, please.
Dmitry Shkurko, National News Agency of Ukraine. I just strongly support the message of the last speaker concerning that it is not necessity to victimize Ukraine and Ukrainians, because, you know, from a formal point of view, victims cannot prevail. But what we are going to do, we are going to prevail, to defend our country. I can say you that exactly because I spent some time in the armed forces, so I know exactly what kind of mood they have in their mind. They are not going to give up. They are not going to stop their fight. So that the victims are not able to fight, and this is very important to remember for our politicians and some kind of official peasants coming also to Brussels. Now my question. That's obvious that EU and Ukraine have the common challenge called populism. I'm pretty sure that it will be topical in Ukraine, but right now we need maybe to pay much more attention to events in European Union itself. Why? Because for Ukraine, European Union and its elections, its freedoms, its values, it's a benchmark. It is something we are we are leading to that direction. If European Union will fail, or it will be corrupted by some kind of rightist, leftist, I don't know how to describe that ideas, it will be the catastrophe for Ukraine. My question is how, for Ukrainian part, how resilient Ukraine is if, in the case if European Union will fail to defend its own values during the elections, and to European side, of course, how do you think is such a development possible? Thanks.
Thank you very much. Anybody else, please? Taras, any questions about Ukrainian corruption at this time?
I'll ask a question. On a more kind of pan-European, because particularly because Roland Freudenstein's here. It's interesting to me that we are talking about how Ukraine has changed so much since 2014. It's become, and as it were, more on the course of pro-European integration, etc. And of the leading presidential candidates in Ukraine's election this year, the two main political groups in the European Parliament to which those candidates have links to are the EPP and ALDE, the Alliance of Liberals and Democrats for Europe. These are Gritsenko, which is the Alliance of Liberals, and Bekeshkina Fatherland Party, and the bloc Petro Poroshenko Solidarity with the EPP. Of those three candidates, only one in their election program supports EU and NATO membership. In Gritsenko's and Tymoshenko's election program, there is nothing on this question. So it's kind of surprising that on the one hand, we think things have changed, but on the other hand, some things have not changed. That some candidates seem to be too afraid to say openly that they are in favor of EU and NATO membership, even though they are members of these European political groups. So I'm wondering what the experts here, I will ask the next panel, the candidates, representatives, but I'm wondering what they think of this. I think the other thing which is interesting, just more of a comment now, this is the first election in Ukraine where in none of the election programs is any candidate supporting membership of the CIS Customs Union. This is nobody's really picked up on this. And I know in the next panel I think there'll be somebody from Yuriy Boyko's election campaign, so I will be interested to know why they're afraid to say this. But that's kind of interesting. So there are people on both sides of the divide, as it were, who are afraid to say openly what they maybe stand for. In fact, of the main candidates in this year's elections, only two, Petro Poroshenko and Andrei Sadovey, the mayor of Lviv, openly say they support NATO and EU membership. So some things haven't completely changed. Some things have, some things haven't completely changed. I'm wondering what your...
Okay, thank you very much. And maybe one more question or comment, and then we'll proceed. Yeah, please.
Thank you for wonderful presentations. I have a question to Mr. Freudenstein, and also I focus on your last statement about the narratives in Europe regarding Ukraine. You said that populists in the EU could use the narratives that Ukraine experts, corruption, crime, illegal workers, and so on, and that we need to do more in promotion of our efforts to making Europe a secure region. Could we transform this narrative of war in such a narrative that we are making the Europe more secure by fighting the aggressive Russian Federation on our territory? And could we make this narrative as the key topic of enhancing of our European integration? Thank you.
Thank you very much. So let's move to our experts. Who is going to start?
I'll try to answer both questions. Attitudes of Ukrainians to the EU integration, and because it links with a question from Taras Kuzya about programs of candidates. We have a rather complicated situation in public minds, because on one hand, people are deeply dissatisfied with what is happening in their country. Majority thinks that Ukraine is going in the wrong way. People are basically not satisfied with reforms, despite probably some exemptions like decentralization. In the same time, people don't want to go back to the situation before 2014. People think that, majority thinks that the country needs changes, and majority supports the Ukrainian course towards European integration. So precisely, people support basic vector of development, but they are not satisfied with details, with how it is happening in practice. So it is a question to politicians. And also some people are critically looking to advices of our international partners, because significantly a big part of population thinks that Ukrainians should follow the recommendation of IMF and other Western institutions, but also towards those that do not contradict to national interests. So the part of people who think that Ukraine should adopt partly their policy, take into account not only our demands or demands to Ukraine from our international partners, but also take into account more national interests and to modify somehow this political course. And because of that, the part of supporters such political forces that do not fully support, that not refused, but are rather critical to some aspects of reform, is rather significant, like Radical Party of Oleg Leshko. They have constant support on the level of 7% of population. It's the first part of my answer. And the second, about Taras' question, why not NATO figurate openly in all programs? Because if in a case with EU, we have a majority of population who supported, arithmetical majority, absolute majority who supports the integration into EU. In the case with NATO, we have a relative majority who supports integration into the NATO if we ask a direct question. Because of that, probably advisors or candidates are rather cautious with those, not to push back a part of their potential voters. As I mentioned, when people, supporters of certain candidates, answers to the question, are you for NATO or for non-bloc status? A large part of them, up to 30–40%, selects the option not bloc status. Because of that, I think the candidates are rather cautious with this issue.
So it's more the question of tactics than the question of the politics, which is immediate reaction.
Yeah, but even though, for example, many of these candidates' political presence, their political factions in parliament, supported changes to the constitution. But for some candidates, there's still a multi-vector foreign policy.
Thank you very much. Martin, would you please join us?
Yes. I'll address 3 points. The first one... Yeah, but it was Roland. That's okay. I understand. It's Martens Center. Martens Center, that's all right. So I will... Yeah, absolutely. Yes, yes, yes. So the question, what if EU fails to defend its values in the elections? Our colleague asked this from the Foreign Ministry. I think that pertains also to the other colleagues' questions. I mean, who has to prove something? You know, in my opinion, you're absolutely right of appealing to the EU to defend European values and to show that they show solidarity with the Ukrainian people in its very dangerous situation. Absolutely clear. But I mean, if you take any opinion poll, I've just tried on my mobile, and I don't get any opinion poll of EU citizens about Ukrainian membership, but I can pretty safely bet that you will have a majority against today if people are asked. I mean, provided they know where Ukraine is. On the Iberian Peninsula, I wouldn't be too sure that they know exactly where it is, but provided they know which country is Ukraine, you ask EU citizens, do you want them to have to become a full member of the European Union in the near future, and you get a majority against. I mean, this is the facts on the ground. Okay, we have to deal with that situation. And my line of argument before was that it should be the moderate political parties in the EU and Ukrainians together, and each one has their job to do here. But we cannot assume at the moment that a majority of EU citizens would welcome Ukrainian membership. That's partly because of something we call enlargement fatigue. It's partly because of the widespread impression that the enlargements of 2004, 2007, 2013 were premature, were not sufficiently prepared, were not sufficiently accompanied by smart policies to soften the disruptions that happened, and so on, and so on, and so on. This concerns labor market, this concerns social security systems. So the impression is that we already enlarged too fast and for too many countries in the last 15 years. So are we going to consider taking in a country of 46 million people with massive, I'm sorry to say, but with massive problems of corruption and reform and of independent judiciary and public service reform and so on? Are we going to do that? You know, no, that is not on the cards, which is why in all the agreements between the European Union and Ukraine of the last couple of years, both before and after 2014, you have this fantastic diplomatic formula of Ukraine has a European perspective. Now that means different things to different people. Let's be honest. Some nations in Central Europe, for example, at the eastern flank of the European Union, it means European perspective means future membership. At least we're not taking it off the table. We're not saying you don't have a chance. For other countries, such as France, I would say Germany to a large extent today, the Netherlands, Austria, and certainly other countries in Western Europe, European perspective means a close relationship but no membership. This is classical, this is what happens in negotiations within the European Union when we can't agree. You know, you don't want to leave the issue off the table. You want to talk about it. You want to give it a name. And you want to give it a name that different people interpret differently. And this is the European perspective. So I think the best we can achieve at the moment is to leave the European perspective on the table with some people in the European Union, actually many political leaders, understanding it as an endorsement of future Ukrainian membership. But having no illusions that public opinion in the EU is anytime soon going to buy this idea that actually membership in the EU of Ukraine is good for us. And this brings me to the question of, could Ukraine improve its position by telling Europeans that Ukraine is now defending Europe militarily from Russian aggression? this is another point where this is just an uphill struggle in public debates in most EU member countries. There are some countries, like in the Baltics or in Poland, where that question is clearly answered by the majority of people. Yes, Ukraine is fighting for a larger set of values here, and Ukraine is bearing the brunt of Russian aggression as we speak, absolutely. But that's a minority of member states. In most member states, people actually, unfortunately, if you want, they believe Russian propaganda, or if you want, they believe their own Putin-Versteher, not all of whom are on the payroll of the Kremlin, let's be honest. Some of these people, like my own fine compatriot Gerhard Schröder, for example, Gerhard Schröder would say what he's saying even if he wasn't paid by the Kremlin. Because these people honestly believe they're preventing World War III, or they're doing a good job for the business community in their country, or for whatever reason. That, you know, we have to get along with Russia. We can't eradicate Russia from the map. Russia is there. You can't have peace and stability in Europe without or even against Russia, right? That's what these people are saying. And let's not make the mistake of only accusing the Kremlin of paying these people and making them what they're saying, because that's not true. These people they believe they have good arguments. It's up to us, yes, and the Martens Center has been at the forefront of the effort. It's up to us to prove them wrong and to argue against them politically, and not just pointing fingers that these are paid by the Kremlin. So this is my long answer to your very, very good question. I think that Ukraine would do a much better job at convincing EU citizens that it's defending European values if it was more serious about reforming and about fighting corruption and about strengthening the independent judiciary and all this. That's the more important element. The fighting in Donbass is another point, but that is not the most important point that will convince the maximum amount of people.
Thank you very much. I just would like, okay, Grigory, please.
Thank you, Igor. I have one comment and one question. My name is Grigory Nemiri, member of the Parliament, Bekeshkina party. So one comment related to the question asked by a gentleman. I would like to correct him. Currently, there are two Ukrainian parties who are members of the European People's Party political family. It's Bekeshkina and UDAR. There are 5 Ukrainian parties who applied for the membership in the European People's Party, including the bloc Petro Poroshenko since spring 2015. So far, process has not been ended. So, and that's why I would like to correct this point. My question related to the sociologist in the panel. I just watched attentively the yesterday's election in Moldova, and I found one thing in common. While in Moldova it was parliamentary elections, in Ukraine we will face first presidential elections. The things I found in common that both in Moldova and in Ukraine, there apparently a trick or coincidence that in Moldova there are 2 candidates with the same name, first name and the family name, and in Ukraine there are 2 candidates with the same family name and the acronyms of their first name and the patronymic name. So they're going to be 2 Timoshenko, you, we. And as some related to most recent polls, I was surprised to find out, and that's also a question to sociologists, what their instinct, experience, telling them the guy whose name Yuriy Timoshenko, a quite obscure guy, a member of the parliament, whose family income, according to his own interview to BBC, is less than $10,000 found or borrowed money for deposit of around $100,000. His rating now 2.7%, and according to these polls, he's ahead of Andriy Sadovy. He's ahead of Sergei Taruta, he's ahead of Roman Besmertny, so Olga Bogomol is much more known candidates. What do you think it tells us? And if you have a hypothesis, I would like to hear who of the other candidates might be interested to put this person in the race. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Let's arrange our discussion in the following way. Maybe one or two more comments, and then we are going to wrap it. Gentlemen and Andrei, okay? Please. Sure, okay. We'll take one more. Yeah, please.
Thank you. My name is Vyacheslav Knezhnitsky. I'm director of the representative office of Naftogaz in Ukraine. My question to Ukrainians, first of all, and then I will make a comment on Roland's comments. Just recently today there was a news that one of the candidates, his name is Zelensky, referred to the question to his supporters how to select people for his future government, including SBU, this is the State Security Service. It seems to me this guy just is meddling somewhere between the theater performance and something like that. It is not casting. How can that guy to be number one for the time being without having an idea how he can form the government in the future? And are you serious to say that he's number one? Because recently I have seen one video where in the Ocean Plaza there was a TV company asking young guys full of beers, will you go and vote for Zelensky? They said yes, of course. And later on in the same evening they say that's absolute support for Zelensky. My question is, what are the questions during the during the polls put exactly how to distinguish between the two, between at least the two candidates? It's impossible to say that everything is the same. It is not the same, it's different. Because when you approach a public opinion, it is very much depends upon the question you put, especially in terms of the candidates.
Okay,
sorry. And the second question that's about Mrs. Tymoshenko. We also would like to know whether does she get money against her evaluation of her assets. That's also a problem because time and again Ukrainian society is very much interested. Where does Mrs. Tymoshenko get money?
Yeah, I'm sorry. Actually, this is not questionable to us, so we are not going to to discuss.
But that's about the Tymoshenko, Yuriy Tymoshenko.
I'm sorry. You have Yuriy. Yeah, okay. We could say it, but again, I would like to say that we could ask about anyone.
There was a question about Yuriy Tymoshenko. Immediately, I refer to Yuriy Tymoshenko.
Okay, so let's put it in such a way. We are going to clarify the issues about sociology and everything like that, but unfortunately, or fortunately, maybe fortunately, we are not ready actually to discuss the personal wealth and all the other. It's not the question to us. We are not representing investigating bodies or something like that. So let's be clear on this point. I promise Andrei and somebody else. Yeah, Andrei and who? Okay.
Could I ask also Roland about the narratives? You've mentioned the topic of corruption, and we discussed it previously in previous panel. How do you think maybe the corruption topic and anti-corruption activities became something like the up-to-date religion now in the societal sphere, and it could distract the public attention from other crucial issues, and this corruption and anti-corruption manner could manipulate with the public opinion both in EU and Ukraine. It's just a question, it's not a statement and hypothesis. Thanks.
Thank you. It's a very good question, but unfortunately it requires a special discussion. So, I don't know whether it will be possible to answer all the questions. Dmitry, 15 seconds, because we need some time to take the questions, not only to take, but at least actually to try to answer them, please.
Thank you. Just very quick comment to Roland Freudenstein. I really largely agree with your line of thinking and your speech, but just one correction about the public opinion poll. You meant that if theoretically there were a public opinion poll among EU citizens, they would vote for, against, and so on. Actually, to my best knowledge, there was only one, but there was already one public opinion poll done by Yalta European Strategy in 2017. It's interesting that they have very interesting results. They done polling in 7 member states, different ones from Lithuania, Poland to Germany, Italy, France, Netherlands, and UK. And very interesting results that overall, in general, 58% of the European citizens said that they would support Ukraine joining NATO, and 48% support joining European Union. I mean, of course, there are different, big difference depending on member states. Of course, Netherlands were the most kind of skeptical ones. Actually, the share is more or less the same as the result of the referendum at 2016. But still, I mean, it's very, very interesting that you can say that despite some problematic member states and many others, we have really support for Ukrainian perspectives. And I agree that we need to work more on that, but I don't agree that it's unrealistic. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Let's move in such a way. Maybe we'll start from Oleksandr, Yuriy, Iryna, and Roland. Okay? So you may take any question, or maybe we'll just to wrap up the discussion, the presentation of your points, please.
My role during this election, but I would like to stress on a role of independent assessment of this election, because our discussion proves us that it's very important to distinguish political motivated position and real assessment of election. The record number of NGOs, observation NGO, were registered by Central Election Commission. Its number 139 NGOs who will observe election. According to our assessment, 40 organizations directly connected with candidates. 80% of NGOs who will observe election did not have any experience in this sphere. In our view, it will be very difficult for voters to distinguish fake observation and real observation, and in our view, it's one of the problems in this election.
Thank you very much, Yuriy and Iryna. You have the most difficult task, actually, to say a few good words about sociology as a science, right? Please.
Yes, it's a typical question for us, and so we used to answer it. First question from Mr. Namir, yes, I try to answer. Really, Mr. Yuriy Tymoshenko takes 1.1% of voters. And I may imagine from whom he breaks those percent. It may happen very important, especially in the second round of elections. But you know as well that it's a very typical Ukrainian political technology of cloning of candidates and political parties. When, on the elections of, if I don't mistake, 2002, on parliamentary elections, there appeared 3 communist parties with different names. Communist Party of Ukraine United, Communist Party of Workers and Peasants, with the purpose of cut percent of people who would vote for the main political party. The same technology used here. Of course, it is profitable for immediate competitors of Yulia Tymoshenko who share a common electorate. And of course, you know whom they are, I suppose. Yes. Second question relate to our formulation of our questions, how we ask people about for whom they supposed to vote. It sounds very typically, and it's not changed through 10 years at least. If the next Sunday will happen the elections of President of Ukraine, for whom would you vote? It's don't presuppose any other provisions like for clown, for somebody else. It's just for persons who are on the list with their second names and names. Because of that, Mr. Zelensky, as a citizen of Ukraine, who also has the electoral right to be elected as a president, may be put on this list and figurate as a subject of those elections. Okay.
Thank you. Iryna, please.
Yuriy Volodymyrovich Tymoshenko and Yulia Volodymyrovna Tymoshenko, it is understandable this is manipulation, of course. Who is interesting in this? I don't think that Yuriy Volodymyrovich Tymoshenko, because he was excluded from his party. And in the situation when each % is important, I think that it can be used. But in our research, he get 1.1%. This is not crucial, but it is, I think, the deal of the Tymoshenko party to explain people about this. And it depends, the role of such manipulation will depend on the place of two Tymoshenkos in voting list. Secondly, about the question my colleague explained, this is absolutely the same formulation in all electoral polls, not only in Ukraine but everywhere. If the elections will be next in Ukraine, this is Sunday. In some countries, this is maybe another days. For whom will you vote? It's absolutely clear. And I'd like to say maybe some words about populism. Populism is inevitable in all countries with competitive elections. But there is a difference between populism in developed countries, when the majority is the middle class. I'd like to remind you the results of referendum in Switzerland about the guarantee income, negative, and populism in rather poor countries as Ukraine. So in Ukraine, for populists, the field is very wider. And in these elections, maybe populism is on the record level, because of the unpredictable results, when each % could be decisive, and just on this reason, candidates manipulate by emotions of people and lie. Sorry.
Roland, you have the privilege to finish our discussion.
Yes, I won't abuse it. Yuriy and Yulia, that sounds like the Ukrainian version of Romeo and Juliet. Sorry about that. So, corruption and anti-corruption as a religion. I thought the religion was climate change, but no, but seriously, I mean, of course, it's a legitimate question, but I think, correct me if I'm wrong, but the Maidan was most of all not about East or West or capitalism or communism or something. The Maidan was about living in a relatively corruption-free modern European country. And if this hope was so disappointed, as it may have been over the last couple of years, I mean, that's for you guys to judge, not for me, but I have the impression that most Ukrainians feel that they have been disappointed. If that is so, then the discussion whether this is a religion or not is a little bit frivolous, you know, because it seems to be something that people really think is important. That's what I want to say. So, you know, the fact that politicians are pointing fingers at each other and say, maybe I'm corrupt, but you're more corrupt than me, you know, I mean, that's an unfortunate element of politics that is not limited to Ukraine. We have this in other countries as well. But you know, I do think this question is at the core of the aspirations of the Ukrainian people. So we should take it seriously. And as to the opinion poll that our colleague quoted, I'm heartened. I think that's good news, but I would like to see more opinion polls in more member states that corroborate this. I mean, if this, did you say 48% for Ukrainian EU membership or 38%? I didn't catch it. But if it was 48% in 7 member states, that is excellent news, but we need to build on it. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I would like to be as brief as possible. First of all, thank you, Roland. Thank you, Iryna. Thank you, Yuriy. Thank you, Oleksandr. And I would like actually, well, to finish this panel with a political statement. Let's join our efforts in order to prevent the failure of the European project. Thank you very much.